My name is Taylor Roy, and this is the second economic development webinar of the series. This one will be on workforce housing, and it's also funded by the Economic Development Administration, EDA. So today's presentation will first go over why workforce housing is important and its purpose, and then I'll provide a few case studies that highlight what others are doing around the area, and then hopefully that will spark some ideas in your own community. We'll have tips and tools for further guidance and also implementation strategies. We'll provide takeaways, key takeaways for what to do in your own town. And then finally, at the end, we'll have time for questions. All right. So, what is workforce housing? It's defined as permanent housing intended as a primary year round residence that is available to households regardless of your age and is best provided near places of employment. It's built to suit for individuals and families that have middle to low incomes. People who often need workforce housing don't always qualify for low income, so this is a good supplement. This housing can also support teachers, police officers, healthcare workers, many essential workers in our everyday lives, the barista down the street, right? Purpose and importance. So the importance of workforce housing is that it supports local employees and forces and focuses on affordability. Recently, an article from New Hampshire Business Review came out that said the median price for a single family home as of April 2024 was 515,000, which is 515, yeah, thousand, which is a lot. The Joint Center for Housing Studies revealed in the nation's housing report that the number of US apartments that rent for 2,000 or more per month almost doubled between 2005 and 2015. So the cost of apartments for rent for $2,000 are increasing dramatically. And while the number of homes for rent for less than $800 decreased more than 2%. So we see high priced apartments and homes increasing, right? We see those increasing, but we see the low priced apartments and homes decreasing. Not all people in the workforce will qualify for low income housing, so it provides a great option to fill the gaps in the middle income housing market. It doesn't always rely on government subsidies. It shortens commute times, along with easier housing to town makes it easier for access to essentials like grocery stores, childcare, shorter times for public transportation, dining, and much more. It also creates more reliable employees, along with easier access to essentials. Having a residency allows employees to be more reliable because how is someone expected to be employed when they don't have a suitable place to live, right? We'll now go over the first case study here. This one is Guile Hill in Hanover, New Hampshire. We'll first talk about the development specs. So how big is the how big is the building, like how many units there are. We'll go over cost and then the timeline of this project. So first, development specs. There's 76 units, 61 are affordable housing units, 15 are market rate. They're range from 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom to 3 bedroom. And then the baths you can read here change. There's about 250 parking spaces. And these apartments also meet LEED and Energy Star standards, which is nice because we know they're green apartments. And they're also within walking distance of downtown and recreational trails. So out of the 120 units at Guile Hill, so 44 of them are privately owned condominiums, 37 are market rate, and then 7 for moderate income owners. And the remaining that remaining 76 are owned by Twin Pines, and then 61 are affordable, and then the 15 are market rate. Twin Pines Housing Trust is an Upper Valley nonprofit housing developer. They originally borrowed money to help pay for the $35 million project, which was then used to bridge a construction financing shortfall. Costs. So the apartment building was 2.5 million. And then the affordable unit monthly rents range from around $600 to the 3-bedroom, which is $1,000, which is still pretty really good for this area. Because if we remember back to that, one of the first slides, that median price for a single family home is at a whopping rate of $515,000, which is kind of crazy. And the timeline. So this is interesting. So in 2023, they originally partnered with the Heartland Group to build 61 rental units in the 36 condos. And then all the way to 2016, so the Twin Pines Housing Trust that I talked about before completed the apartment building in the project, and those ones are affordable housing. So the ones owned by Twin Pines. Our next case study. This one is the lofts at Bates Mill in Lewiston, Maine. So not in New Hampshire, but in Maine, close by. We'll go over the development specs, the cost, and then the timeline of this project. So it was a pre-Civil War textile mill, the original building, with modern storage on the first floor. And then it has affordable housing on the upper 3 floors, which is interesting and really different from the other 2 case studies today. There's 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. There's a total of 48 housing units, and then 33 of those are affordable housing. And this is also within walking distance of offices, shops, restaurants, public library, theater, right? Because if we remember back to some of the beginning slides, it's really good to have housing located within close essentials, daily essentials, like grocery stores, restaurants, libraries, childcare, things like that. Costs. The total cost of this project was 9 million, so a little bit more. And then the rent ranges from about $600 to $950, right? $596, $921 a month, which is still, again, really good. And the timeline. So in 1854, the Bates textile mill was built. So this building is really pretty old. In 2000, they stopped the mill operations. And then in 2012, the renovation was completed. And then our final case study here. Pepperidge Woods Cooperative in Barrington, New Hampshire. Again, development specs, cost, and then we'll go over a timeline of this project. This one is a little different. It's a ROC, a resident-owned community. There they can buy and sell, but home buyers must be part of the resident-owned community and pay fees up front. In this community, there's 44 sites for homes, and it's closely located to UNH, which is a 15-minute drive. This would be really good for especially people who are maybe are a graduate, a postgraduate, right? Still attending postgraduate classes at UNH, might have a family and need a home now. Maybe they're a non-traditional student. Maybe they have a family and they need to go back to school. This would be a really good place for someone like that. The Warren Farm also provides fresh fruits and vegetables, which is less than 2 miles away. And then it's also near outdoor recreation, which includes swimming, skiing, and boating. Costs. So the way I found the cost for these is, so I went onto Redfin and I saw past homes that were sold because I wanted to give a little insight into how much they actually cost and the reality of what the cost was for this 44 sites. So this home was sold in December, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,344 square feet. This one was sold for around 140, this one was sold for $145,500. And then I found this one in March 2023, which I think is much more telling due to inflation. The COVID-19 pandemic changed a lot of things in pricing. So this one's a little more accurate. This one's a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, still in the same community. Um, a little bit bigger, actually, 1,421 square feet. But it is more expensive. It's 205,000. But still, again, today, if we look back in April, the median home price for a single family home in New Hampshire reached $515,000. So still this 205 is a bargain compared to the 515. And then the timeline. So in 2004, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund developed Pepperidge Woods to be a resident-owned community. And then in 2006, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund was given the Citizens Bank Heroes Housing Award for the project. And then in 2010, the co-op purchased the land and infrastructure, including water lines and roadways. And tools. Next steps. So this is kind of what to do next in your community. So I want workforce housing. What should I do next? What are the next steps? First one, work with developers, right? This is really vital to a project getting off the ground. Look at zoning and explore zoning changes. Are there changes in zoning you could make, right? Consult with peers on best practices. Raise awareness in your community. That's also really important. Raising awareness about why you might need workforce housing. Always consider the why, right? Why do you need it? What kind of businesses in your community could benefit from this workforce housing? Because it also, again, creates stable employees, reliable employees. Everyone wants a reliable employee. Look for grants and funding opportunities. And I'll touch on this again in a little bit. And then contact local affordable housing programs. I'll also touch on in these next few slides. And then next we'll talk about the implementation strategies you can apply to your own community. So this is the first one, that raise awareness. So raise awareness about workforce housing in your community. This can be done through webinars or informational sessions, just like this one. Flyers, posters, brochures, or online resources like a online resource hub that provides guidance for municipalities, things like that. Town meetings can be very informational. And then local affordable housing programs. These are programs like AHEAD in Littleton, New Hampshire. Next, strategy number 2, find funding. Find grants or other funding that supports your project. So as I talked about before, AHEAD is one of these places that could provide funding or support for your workforce housing. New Hampshire Housing. The state of New Hampshire also has grants and funding available, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is also another one. And then lastly, the USDA loans for rural and suburban home buyers, right? And this would be more for that co-op community that you could buy a home rather than rent an apartment. And I also provided links at the end of this presentation to every single one of these sites. So you can go on and find and look at the grants and the funding available yourself also. All right, strategy 3, repurpose. Repurpose vacant buildings or consider infill in urban areas. So reuse underutilized buildings or land. Infill provides an opportunity for neighborhood revitalization. This can also reduce greenhouse gases. There's less buildings, less building time, less machinery used, less fossil fuel output, right? and the cost to install new infrastructure. It's all reduced, often combined with other uses like mixed use. This one's really interesting. I found two really good examples in New Hampshire. One of them was the Prime Roast Coffee Company, and although they didn't turn this vacant building into housing, I thought this was a really good example. The building was originally built in 1840s. It was a mill manager's house in Keene. It sat abandoned until 2014. So it was built in the 1840s, sat abandoned until 2014. Judy Rogers bought it and turned it into a roastery for her coffee business, Prime Roast Coffee Company. And although this abandoned building was turned into a business, I just still think it provides a great example of what communities can do or what you can do. A better example, more close to home. This one happened in Manchester. It's called the Residence at Sundial. So it was an industrial building built in the early 1900s. It was originally a shoe factory. And then they produced sunglasses. The Foster Grant Company produced sunglasses in the 1950s. And Hesser College, now known as the Mount Washington College, moved into the building in 2013. The residents were completed in 2019. There's 5 stories and 135 units. So this was an abandoned building and now it's 5 stories, 135 units. They are luxury. They consider them luxury. That's what they say. It includes studio, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. In the rents, again, these ones are pretty high because they're considered luxury. It ranges from 2,000 or the upper $1,900 to about $2,300. But again, I just got this one in here because I thought it was a really good example of how they turned a vacant building into 135 units for people to live in. And it's just minutes from Manchester, downtown Manchester. Number 4, encourage development. Be open to informal discussions with developers. Think about what types of housing do you need? Do you need in your master plan? Or what type of housing does your master plan encourage? And that brings me to my second point, promote your master plan if relevant, right? If there are plans in your master plan that have the kind of housing you want to build in community, I would show that to developers and say, this is what our master plan says. This is what our community would like to see in the future. Adopt or ramp up the use of conceptual design or preliminary discussions with your planning board. So a discussion with a planning board and community to talk about potential housing developments or projects. These are great people to get in contact with, especially the planning board. And then this eliminates many obstacles and allows a partnership with your community, right? The sooner you get everybody talking, the sooner everybody knows about the project, better funding you can get, right? Just better project planned out overall. A last strategy, number 5, update your zoning. Adopt zoning that is inclusive and provides for diverse types of housing. Reduce the number of parking spaces for dwelling units. Typically, there are zoning laws in towns governing the amount of required parking spaces per dwelling unit. This can become problematic in towns where there's limited parking spaces, but available housing that could be used. An example I like to use a lot is Littleton. The businesses on Main Street have apartments above, but as you know, there's not a lot of parking in Littleton. So that could be a place where this could be used. The occupant also may not own a vehicle or may utilize public transportation because the apartment's already in town, which then eliminates the need for any parking per dwelling unit altogether and just allows for more housing in your community. Diversifying housing types allowed by right. So this means changing zoning regulations so areas in your town aren't single family only, right? And they can have ADUs or attached units. And then lastly, remove barriers to ADUs. The New Hampshire Housing provides numerous resources on attached dwelling units and how to implement them. So this is when if no one knows, an ADU is when there's another dwelling unit on the same property as the original dwelling unit or the single family home, or it's attached to the single family home or the original dwelling. And that is the end for me. Thank you for coming to this webinar series. You can either ask me a question or you can just type it into the chat if you're not comfortable. And this presentation was developed by us at North Country Council with funding from the Economic Development Administration. And then this is my email and our website. And then our recordings will be posted on our page. And we also have a YouTube channel that these will be posted on. And then these are the funding resources I talked about before. I just wanted to show you those before. Questions? Oh yeah, if you didn't read the chat, Angie said we'd also love any ideas or best practices you're seeing in your community and region. So what is like your community and region doing? Yes, Alan?
Hi, thanks, Taylor. That was really great. What an important summary of, as well as a set of specific examples. It reminds me how much good work there is happening. We often hear only the news about we need housing, because we really need housing. And it's a very long, slow process, but I really liked the different summaries you provided. Because through my role, and for those I'm not familiar with on the call, I work with the Hanover Co-op food stores. We're at the southern end of Grafton County, but pay close attention to the North Country because, you know, when the North Country thrives, the whole region thrives, right? My work involves, you know, advocacy on affordable housing. So I'll just tag on to your, you know, broad information with a couple of points. First of all, as you were speaking, in my inbox, I just learned that Governor Sununu has recently signed House Bill 1361, which allows for more appropriate placement of resident-owned communities. We often think of them as manufactured home parks, because prior to this legislation, most municipalities in the state, while they might have had, in fact, New Hampshire leads the nation, has been a leader on the resident-owned communities. But when we look at zoning across our communities in the state, there was many communities said, yeah, we've got a resident-owned community, but our zoning does not allow any new ones to be built. House Bill 1361 addresses that to have realistic and reasonable opportunities for the development and expansion of manufactured housing parks. This is such a critical solution, as you pointed out, Taylor, be it someone with, you know, close to UNH, or someone who is serving in facilities or maintenance as one of the housekeeping staffs that really are critical to our economy. So that was point one I wanted to make. You listed so many good examples. I will add one that some on the call are familiar with, that here in the Upper Valley, a number of employers have gotten together to pool resources to have the Upper Valley Affordable Workforce Housing Fund, that is aimed at helping developers bridge the financing gap. It is not the main source of funding, but it could be a small portion that helps a developer focused on affordable housing aimed at that, you know, 60 to 80% of the area median income. And it allows a project to go through. These employers have pooled together about $10 million. It is not focused on housing for their employees. It is to get projects done. So, you know, I can, you know, at a later time, share further information there. I'll try to come up, there's an NHBSR webinar on it. I'll try to place that in the chat, and I'm going to go back to mute.
Noah, yes?
Put in the chat first for anybody that's not familiar. The New Hampshire Housing Toolbox, which was a joint kind of project of the 9 regional planning commissions and my office, the Office of Planning and Development at the state, that we created last year as part of the regional housing needs assessment project that each regional planning commission worked on. It can for communities that are kind of thinking about, they want to do something to encourage more housing, but they're not really sure what they want to do and they're trying to get a good lay of the land. The toolbox has 20 different tools, really spanning the gamut from like different development techniques and financing techniques like 79E and TIF districts to zoning changes like mixed use development, inclusionary zoning, so on and so forth. So that's one resource I wanted to point out to everybody to definitely check out if you haven't looked at that already. The other thing I wanted to say is I don't have more information, but to be on the lookout, the Invest NH Housing Opportunity Planning Grant Program recently received additional appropriation of about $2 million. There'll be additional webinars and information coming out about how to apply for that additional funding. I think some of you on the call may have been in communities that received initial HOP grants. But this is basically the second round of housing opportunity planning grants. And for those who may not have been familiar with that program, those are grants to do at the community level, whether it's doing a housing chapter of a master plan, auditing all your land use regulations to make them more streamlined and encourage housing, or to actually work on some actual regulatory change, drafting a new ordinance or such that can actually encourage more housing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it might be, I think it's in this. I think the link to the website is in this, but if it's not, I will definitely put it in it before I upload this presentation onto our website. Anyone else have questions, input, like to share successes in your community or what you're seeing? Well, if there's no other questions, if you do have any questions or would like me to add something in, or do you think that's helpful, just shoot me an email. My email's right here. If you ever want to get to know me or talk or have coffee, we can also do that too. Other than that, I think I will end this session. Thank you so much for everybody attending.